Okay, this is Converting Rational Numbers, Part 3. We're going to be converting from fractions to percents and percents to fractions. So get your notes and let's get started. All right, to convert from fractions to percents, we are going to use equivalent fractions to change the denominator to 100, then use the numerator as the answer, and we will add a percent sign. So we are going to use equivalent fractions to change the denominator to 100. Then use the numerator as the answer and add a percent sign. So what that looks like is these are for those fractions that are really easy to convert to 100. So let's say we had 2/5. Okay, it says make it equal to 100 in the bottom. Okay, so we know to get from 5 to 100, we can do that easily. We can multiply by 20. So we do that in the top, and we get 40 in the top. And then it says use the numerator as the answer. So there's my 40 and a percent sign. Okay, so those are for when those fractions are really easy to get to 100 in the bottom. The other option, when it's not easy to get 100 in the bottom, is to change your fraction to a decimal. And then to a percent. Because we've already learned how to change a decimal to a percent. It even says, use your notes to divide the fraction out, then move the decimal 2 times to the right. Don't forget to add that percent sign. Okay, let's do some examples. The first one, what is 4/5 as a percentage? So hopefully you recognize that 5 is going to be a really easy conversion to 100. So we're going to do it the easy way. To get from 5 to 100, we just did this example, multiply by 20. Okay, we multiply by 20, we get 80 in the top. And then it tells us we're going to use the numerator as our answer. We're looking for a percentage here. So we're 80, and then we have our percent sign. Okay? Pretty easy there. Now our next example is 7/16 as a percentage. Okay, when we have 7/16, I can tell you there's not going to be a number we can multiply by to get to 100 perfectly. So we're going to have to do it a little bit different. Okay, this would be option 2. We're going to change that fraction to a decimal. So to do that, the 7 goes inside, the 16 goes on the outside. We put our decimal in, add a 0. How many times does 16 go into 70? I believe it's 4 times. We get 64, subtract, add a 0. 16 is going to go into 63 times. Okay, and that would be 48. With 2 left over, add a 0. 16 goes into 21 times. This probably wasn't a great example. It's going to keep going and going and going. Add a 0, bring it down. 16 goes into 40 2 times. Here we go. 32 with 8 left over. Bring down 1 more 0. And then 16 goes into 80 exactly 5 times. Okay, so that was a lot of division. But we get to our answer. And remember that first step was to change our fraction to a decimal. But we're looking for that percentage. So remember, when we change from a decimal to a percent, the P looks like an R. So we're going to move that decimal 2 times to the right. 1, 2. So our final answer would be 43.125%. Okay? So it's 2 steps on that. We go from a fraction to a decimal to a percent. Okay? The only time we can go from a fraction to a percent is going to be when it's those easy conversions to 100. Let's look at another example. Peter got 12 out of 15 questions right on a test. What is his grade as a percentage? So this is what teachers do all the time. You got 12 out of 15 right. Can it go to 100 easily? No. So we're going to have to do it the other way. So we put 12 on the inside, 15 on the outside, add our decimal. 15 goes into 120. I'm going to guess 8 times. Oh, look at that. Exactly 8 times. Okay, so we get 0 as our remainder, so we know we're done. So now we have this decimal, and we're going from a decimal to a percent, so we're going to move our decimal 2 times to the right, add our 0, and don't forget that percent sign. When you move that decimal to the right, you need to add your percent sign. All right, example D is for you to do on your own, and we will check it tomorrow in class. All right, the next side, going from fractions to percents. I'm sorry, from percents to fractions. The other way. We need to know that percents are always out of 100. You've got to know that. Always, always, always out of 100. Okay? We are going to write the percentage as the numerator. And the denominator is always 100. Okay, we cannot have any decimals in a fraction, so no decimals in a fraction. We have to move the decimal to the end. And remember our rule, whatever I do to the numerator, I do to the denominator. Okay, we have to keep things balanced. We're going to see some examples like that. Okay, and then we're going to simplify. We've seen this rule before. Simplify. We're trying to get a fraction. We need to simplify, which means reduce and have no improper fractions. And don't forget to remove the percent sign. Okay, we're going to a fraction, so it's no longer a percent. Let's look at some examples. Our first example, what is 35% as a fraction? So 35% is the same as 35 over 100. Then we just simplify. I know they both can be divided by 5. I'm going to divide the top by 5. I'm going to divide the bottom by 5, which is equal to 7 over 20. And that's as simple as it gets. Okay, our next example has a decimal, 45.5% as a fraction. So remember, write the percent over 100. Okay? Our rule says we cannot have any decimals in a fraction. So we move this to the end, which means we have to move this one time. We move the top to the right one once. We're going to move the decimal on the bottom to the right once. So now we have 455 over 1,000. When we get that, we still need to simplify. So I'm going to divide them both by 5. Okay? 5 goes into 45 9 times with nothing left over. And when I bring down my 5, it goes in once. So, and 5 goes into 1,000 200 times. And I believe that's as simple as this fraction is going to get. So that would be my answer. 45.5% as a fraction is 91 over 200. All right, let's look at this next one. If you receive 85% on your test, what is the fraction of questions that you got correct? Let's do that part first. So pause your video and unpause when you have the right answer. Again, we're going to put the 85 over 100. I'm going to divide by 5 on the top and the bottom because I know that's not a number that we can divide by. 85 divided by 5 is 17. So I got 17 out of 20 20ths correct. Okay, doesn't mean I got 17 questions right. I got 17 20ths of the test correct. Now it says there are 40 questions. How many questions did I get correct? So if I know I got 17 out of 20 right, and there were 40 questions, I'm going to have to check and see, what do I do to get from 20 to 40? I had to multiply by 2 on the bottom, so I multiply by 2 on the top, which gives me 34. So that tells me I got 34 out of the 40 correct. So my answer for the second part of the question would be 34. All right. Last example you guys are going to work on is H, and we'll check that in class tomorrow. Great job. We'll see you tomorrow.